Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana Hrynkiw if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is August the 4th. It is Wednesday. It is a hump day, so I thought this would be a good day to have a little bit of fun. Today, I am joined by our AL.com columnist, Roy Johnson, who you might recognize, and the other gentleman here you might recognize as well. This is a Olympic gold medalist and world champion, Edwin Moses. Edwin Moses is very famous for his work and his athleticism, I should say, in track and field, and also his dabble in bobsledding, I believe. We'll get you to talk about that as well, Mr. Moses. So today, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about the Olympics. We're going to talk about some of the hot topics happening around Olympics and including some of the COVID restrictions. We were just talking about that here before we went live. So there's a lot to touch on. But Edwin, thank you so much for taking your time coming on today. And I can only imagine that watching the Olympics as a former Olympian, as a former gold medalist is just a different experience.
So, Edwin, before you answer that question, Ivana, can I give a little context here? You called him a famous athlete. So let me just give the viewers who may not understand just how dominant this young man was in his day. So for 9 years, 9 months, and 9 days, he went undefeated in, I believe it was 122 400-meter hurdles, 122 over almost 10 years. Think about that, not losing a single race, over 100 finals, over almost a decade. It was certainly one of the, if not the most dominant athletic performances of that era. For those who know my background, know that I covered sports for many years and had the pleasure of covering many Olympic track and field world championships, as well as the Olympics in '88 in Seoul, South Korea. So I watched him run many times, developed a relationship with him and many other athletes. And what's really funny about this era, when none of us changed phone numbers, all of a sudden my phone started ringing a few weeks ago before the Olympics. And I looked at it and said, Edwin Moses? We hadn't talked in years. And leading up to the Olympics, and certainly over the last few days, we've had some great conversations about what's going on in Tokyo. So I just wanted to make sure people understood who we have on with us today. We have true dominance, true sort of an Olympic icon, someone who was not just a famous athlete, but one of the most dominant athletes of his era.
Well, and I'm going to step on you a second, Roy. And again, we're just going to basically talk about you all day, Edwin, and we're not going to let you talk. But on top of that, though, those 122 races, also, we should add that you set the world record 4 times, which is a little bit crazy to think about. I was telling Roy, I can't even walk without tripping over my feet. So imagine winning that many races, setting 4 world records, winning gold in Olympics, and then several other world and international championships. So we will finally give you the mic, Edwin. And I think Roy's right here to make sure we give you the proper introduction.
Yeah, thank you. The only thing Roy didn't say was that Usain Bolt is Edwin Moses of his time.
All right.
Because track and field, I'm just joking. Track and field was a huge sport back then. It was the #1 sport on the planet, even bigger than professional football, professional soccer. It was bigger than Formula One. You know, we had statistically the best marketing numbers and viewership of any sport in the world at that time. And it was really the golden age of track and field. But yeah, I had a fantastic career. But I think the important thing that people need to know is that I went to a little tiny school called Morehouse College in Atlanta, which is a HBCU, Dr. Martin Luther King, Maynard Jackson. You think about Jay Johnson, who was the Secretary of Homeland Security. We've had Spike Lee was one of my classmates, Samuel Jackson, a wide range.
Name dropping. You're just gonna name drop, right?
I have to. They'll be upset. And I have on my Morehouse T-shirt too. But we only had when I was there was 1,000 students, all African American males. We had no track, no field. So for the 5 years that I was there studying physics and engineering, I literally had to jump over fences and go find places to train every day. And the other thing that people don't know, that I was like Urkel when I came out of high school. My senior year, I was 5'7", 117, because I was behind. I was actually put ahead in school. I was like 4 years old in the kindergarten, so I was younger than everyone. Went to Morehouse. Wasn't recruitable in track and field at all. Had a full ride scholarship to study physics and engineering. But I love track and field, and it done relatively good in high school in the 110 hurdles and the 440 was a 120-yard high hurdles then in 440. But I was not a recruitable athlete, and basically just walked on. And 3 years later, I was Olympic champion. Jumping fences and whatnot. So it was a case of, and they talk about HBCUs. I went to the right school at the right time. For a young guy who was 17 years old when he went to college, and basically was a little boy. And I developed into a man, not only mentally and academically, but also on the track. Like a racehorse. Those coats that are 1.5, 2 years old. That was what I was like when I went to Morehouse. And by the time I graduated, I was going to the Kentucky Derby / Olympics.
Well, it's something too, and you talk about kind of your road to the Olympics, and then competing in the 76 and the 84 Olympics, not the 1980 Olympics, and which I learned about doing some research there. But so you went to these two Olympics for track and field. I would love to hear, number one, about your experiences just at the Olympics and in that world. It's kind of its own. I know we call it the Olympic Village, but it's almost a country and a world in its own. And also kind of how you've seen the Olympics, the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, and how that village is just so different due to coronavirus protocols than it was when you competed.
My experience in going to the Olympics, I was so focused, and it was such a hard road for me to get there. I literally had to go to the president of the college and ask for $3,000 because the track team had very little budget and school was closed. We got out in May. Everything happened in June and July. Terms of track, and we didn't have any kind of significant track program. So I begged for $3,000 from President Gloucester. He gave it to me, and I laid out to him exactly what my times were today. I was running like a 49.6 or 49.8. I told him, at this race, I'm going to run 48.8. At this race, I'm going to run 48.5. At this race, I'm going to break the American record. And I gave him the whole layout as to how it was going to happen. And what he said to me was, "Do you really think you can win the Olympic medal?" I said, "If everything works out according to my plans and calculations," because I was a theoretical physicist. I said, when I get to the Olympic Games, I'm going to win the gold medal and break the world record, and I'm probably going to run around 47.5, and that's exactly what happened. But when I got to the village, I mean, I was so focused. I mean, I knew that I was at the Olympics. It was my first international meet ever. First international meet. Walked into that huge stadium that day and saw a stadium that held like 80,000 people. But I was just so focused on what I had to do. So the experience was all around being a gladiator for a week and a half and living that kind of life. Very Spartan. Wasn't a lot that I needed. All I needed was really good food, rest, and keeping people out of my mind and staying away from a lot of distractions. That was the most important thing for me. But it was great. I won the race. I knew I was going to win the race. I had told people I was going to win the race, but the world record at that time was 47.8. I had dropped the American record from 48.30 down to 48.30 going in. And I was only the second man to run under 48 seconds behind John Akibua. So it just started a whole different way of running the 400 hurdles. But the experience was great. I think I missed a lot of it because I was so focused on winning, and that's what the games are like. I wasn't happy to be in the village and going to the disco and hanging out, playing, throwing frisbees and all that. I was not doing that. I was so focused.
Urkel would not be hanging out at the disco. Is that what you're telling us? Talk a little bit about, a couple of things. One, you talk about being a physicist and having a physicist mindset. One of the things that set you apart was the 13 strides between hurdles. And you mentioned you were 5'7", and viewers need to know you grew to 6'2". So you have a long stride. You stride 13 steps between hurdles as opposed to 15 or something irregular by others. And it's one of the things that set you apart. And then also address how these Olympics have been tougher for athletes to remain as focused as you were because of the distractions, because of waiting 5 years, because of COVID, because of the protocols. So address just the physics of your racing and why it set you apart and also what you're hearing from athletes in Tokyo about the atmosphere and how tough it is to stay focused in that atmosphere.
The 13 steps was something that was created really because I was around a group of guys. We were into the physiology, like the muscle intake and energy levels. We did cross country. We did everything we could to kind of fill in the gaps in training that we knew as students at Morehouse. And those were the days when you had to go to the library and get a book to actually find out about high level physiology, or what the Germans or the Russians or what these medical associations were saying about sport and high level training. So we did all that, but the 13 strides was because we knew this information, and we did the training. We did a lot of cross country. During the peak of my career, I was running, Roy, about 1,200 miles a year in cross country at the beach, golf courses, whatnot. I was training like an 800-meter runner. I had that kind of conditioning. And so the 13 steps for me was my natural stride, but I had the power to be able to maintain that after the 6th and 7th hurdle. That was really the key, to be able to maintain that from hurdle 7 through 10. And that's what separated me from everyone else in the race. And then your second question was
in terms of what you're hearing from athletes in Tokyo about just how weird it is because of the COVID protocols.
I spoke to Harvey Glantz, who's coaching Karani James, who should be running. I believe they might have run the 400 meters already just this morning, the final. But he said that everywhere you go, every move you make, there's tons of people, there's lines to wait in, sanitation. He said it's just really, he said it's out of this world. He said it's like living in a space bubble, in a spaceship. They can't go anywhere. No one can go into the city. On their cell phones, on their phones, they give you an app where they can monitor your location to make sure you don't go out. But he said that just not being able to move around has caused a lot of athletes to probably lose it because they feel claustrophobic. And then when they go into the stadium and then no one's there, you know, when you expect the crowd, you expect the Americans to jump up when you come into the stadium, you have a cheering section. None of that is there. So he said it's a very, very strange experience. Very strange experience.
And I know that, right now, and I think you mentioned the finals might be going on, we do know that Norway took the gold, U.S. took the silver in the men's 400-meter hurdles there. And I know that you do not coach and you do not necessarily train these athletes, but as Roy mentioned, you have been in touch with people in Tokyo and who are in the track and field realm in the Olympics. So what kind of nuggets of advice are you offering to either those athletes or those coaches about staying focused? You mentioned that it can be easy to go a little bit crazy, get a little bit claustrophobic in this COVID bubble that they're living in. So I'd love to hear just what advice you're giving them.
Well, just technically, I mean, I had a podcast. Today is Tuesday. I guess it was yesterday. Oh, no, it was Saturday night, Saturday or Sunday, and talking with some women that were actually hurdlers. And I started talking to them about where they measure. The lane is 48 inches wide on the track. And the way that they measure it, the measurement for the official measurement for the distance that you run is 8 inches from the inside curve. So that means, and the lane is 48 inches wide. So you got like 40 inches to play with on the outside. And if you run on the line, you run exactly 400 meters for one lap. If you run on the outside of your lane, say 36 inches to the right, then you're going to be running an extra 3 to 4 feet per turn. And they don't even know that. A lot of athletes have no idea of that. So when you're running on the outside of your lane, you're giving away 3, 4, up to 6 to 10 feet. It could be more on each turn. And so for me, that was just logic. I mean, circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius of the circle. So I actually did the measurements and on a track, and there was 36.5 meters radius, and did it inch by inch. Broke it up into like quarters of a meter, and found out that you're running, significantly further just by not running on the inside of the lane. And so many athletes don't know that. I did. So I felt like I was stealing 12 feet away, 12, 15 feet from at the beginning of the race. And so when you come off the turn, you have a lead that you actually didn't even have to compete for. And so little things like that, hurdle technique, how to be efficient over the hurdles, positions of the body, legs, so forth. I really don't talk too much about the conditioning. I think that's between the athletes and their coach. But in terms of technical, I see people running the hurdles. They run with their right leg and then they switch with their left leg, and you can see them literally going in a curve down the track, swaying as they run in the 35 meters between the hurdles. You can see them move from left to right. And I try to, and those are just subconscious things that they do. And then when I point that out, they say, "Oh, I didn't know that. That means I could be running 2-3 feet further during the race," and cleaning up little things like that.
Edwin, talk a little bit about this hurdles race, both the men's and the women's. We started talking. You said your phone blew up after the men's hurdles race, which people are saying was probably the greatest hurdles race ever. Norway's Karsten Warholm beat the world record by more than a second. Went to 45.94, which is unprecedented. The man who finished second, Ray Benjamin, who is from Mount Vernon, New York, also would have set the world record, except he finished second. You said that Karsten ran the perfect race. So talk about that race. How big is it for track and field? And just give viewers a sense of what you saw as you watched that race later on, because you didn't see it live.
Well, when I was running, and even today, it's everyone talks about the 100 meters and the 200 meters being the marquee events for the Olympic Games. But when I was running, people were just as anxious for the 400 hurdles. In this Olympics, there were more people around the world tuning in for the 400 hurdles, men and women, than there were probably for the 100 meters, because there was no Carl Lewis, there was no Usain Bolt, there was none of the usual names that people have gotten used to. But Warholm from Norway, and I spoke to his coach back in 2017. I had lunch with them when I was actually in Norway, and talked to them philosophically about the event, what it was going to take, the different types of training, what it's going to take to break the barriers. He's in outstanding condition. He runs the same race all the time. He doesn't make a lot of changes. My race, for example, at 13 steps, I ran 19 steps to the first hurdle, then 13 between the first and second, and all the way through the 10th. And then at the last hurdle, which is the only variable, I might run 14 or 15 steps, because instead of 35 meters, it's 40 meters to the finish line. So my whole race, and every time I run, is 152 or 153 steps. And I try to tell them, look, I don't have to think about what I'm going to do. I know that I'm running 13 steps. I don't have to switch legs. I know exactly what's going to happen every single time. And so many of the runners, they go out there not knowing if they're going to win, and if they're going to have to switch from, say, 13 to 14 steps, or 14 to 15, or sometimes even 16. They have no idea until the race unfolds. And so for me, that's just, counterproductive and against my philosophy. So I try to get them to think in these terms. There's a lot that can go wrong. You have 10 hurdles. That means you have 10 takeoffs, 10 transitions over the hurdle, and 10 landings. That's 30 places you can make a mistake right there. Not to mention the start, and not to mention actually hitting a hurdle. So you've got about 40 to 45 possibilities of making a mistake every time you go out. There's 45 things that can happen.
And you mentioned that Warholm ran a perfect race. What did you observe when you watched that race?
He didn't hit any hurdles. He kept up his speed. He put on pressure at the right time. He finished at the end, even though he was getting tracked down between that 9th and 10th hurdle. Ray Benjamin actually caught him. I think at the 9th and the 10th, they were pretty much neck and neck. They tapped down on the ground at the same time, and he came out with a burst of speed. It was it's equivalent to someone breathing their last breath. I mean, at that point in the race, you don't have anything left. So if you can come out and make an acceleration, even if it's just to give you 6 inches of space, that's major in that race, and he did that.
And on the women's side, it was tight, similarly tight as well. Sydney McLaughlin, and Delilah Muhammad were this close.
Yeah.
Again, both set the world record. So it's almost like the 400-meter hurdles have become like the marquee event again. Talk about the Sydney in that race.
Well, in the men's and women's races this year, we've had 2 world records in the men and 2 world records in the women. And in 2019, Delilah broke 2 world records. So there's more progress being made in this event than any other event in the sport. And the progress is its transition is real. Dalila ran a very good race. She ran pretty much a perfect race. The only thing was that she just got beat to the tape physically, just by straight running. She just got outrun to the tape. Now, in Benjamin's race, in the men's race, he made several mistakes that I saw from the camera just looking down the back straightaway as they're coming at you. At the third, fourth, and fifth hurdle, he had to, what we call stutter step. He had to adjust his stride. He had to slow himself down to be able to take off at the right point. And every time he did that, I believe that's when Warholm got away and had a lead on him going at the sixth hurdle. Yeah. And then he made a mistake at the 10th hurdle. He actually hit the hurdle on the lane inside of him. If you look at it again, the hurdle inside on the lane to the left of him actually almost got tipped over. So,
I was popping up some photos we had of you throughout your career, which have been so fun to look at. I'll have to pull up some more here, but I want to ask you to your thoughts on, and I know that, or I'm not going to say I know, I do not believe that you are a gymnast. I am not a gymnast, but I would love to hear your
gymnast. I was a gymnast. I was on the gymnastics team in high school. Yeah.
Of course you were. I don't know why. That's why I caught myself and I said, I'm not even going to say can. So your thoughts on the gymnastics, that the drama happening with the U.S. gymnastics teams. I say that and kind of ending in a good way. We had a Suni Lee who is coming to Auburn, which is located in the state of Alabama. She's coming here this fall, will be on the Auburn gymnastics team. We also had a kind of a fan favorite, I think that's fair to say, Simone Biles, who did not compete in most of her competitions because of something that she had referred to, a gymnast had referred to as the twisties. She'd also said she was putting her mental health first, but she did come back and win bronze before the end of that gymnastics competition. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's happening with the U.S. gymnastics team and Simone Biles in particular.
I think they did a fantastic job. First of all, you have to give it to Simone, because whatever happened, and I know it was basically her GPS system was off, and there was no way she could do those things and come down without, killing herself or getting permanently injured, possibly. I think the gallant thing that she did, it was really great, that I thought, was that she gave her teammates the opportunity to shine, because she could have been selfish and said, I don't care, I'm just going to go out there because I want to take my chances at winning a medal in every event. She gave the other young ladies the opportunity, and virtually all of them won a medal because the team was just that tight, just that good. So I hats off to her for giving the opportunity when she saw fit. And a lot of athletes would be very selfish and wouldn't have done that. So that's
an interesting take, because we've seen on social media everybody who's now an expert in Olympics and in Olympic gymnastics saying, oh, you're an Olympian. You know what you're getting into. You're an Olympian. You do it for your country. How does that make you feel? And what's your response to that kind of criticism that was directed at Simone?
Well, armchair quarterbacks, people that are on the bench eating popcorn at home, they really don't know what it really takes, what kind of training. I'm sure there's a lot of envy built up because she's just so much better than everyone else. And she's done it time and time and time again. I think that's just ridiculous, because you really just don't know what someone else is going through. I've woken up days in track and field where, no matter what you do in training and at meets, no matter what you do, you just can't get it right, because your motor and your sensory system aren't firing the way that they do. Your motor system is not getting the right commands from your brain. And in gymnastics, I would dare anybody to get on a trampoline and jump up and down and do 2 flips and expect to come down on their feet. If you think that what she does is lightweight, then you go on a trampoline, bounce up 12, 15 feet in the air, do 2 flips, and you can even do it on a belt where they'll catch you. But you'll quickly see that if you don't know where you are in space, you don't know where you're going to come down. And for her, that can be dangerous. I say hats off for her giving it up and letting the other girls compete.
Edwin, what are your thoughts on what many are deeming now sort of the mental health Olympics, her statements about putting her mental health first? She is not the only athlete there to say that. Simone Manuel, the swimmer, also talked about it, and other athletes have talked about mental health leading up to these Olympics. Set the stage for us in terms of how respect for mental health has changed over the last 40 years, and how important is this Olympics to the future of sport and recognizing the importance for mental health in athletes? Is the Tokyo Olympics a game changer in that space?
I think it will be. And I think I spoke to you about the two traumatic brain injuries that I had, Roy, that two concussions that put me in the hospital and had me paralyzed from the waist down, and having to learn how to walk all over again, going back to 2017. And I remember laying in my house, trying to get back up on my feet. And eventually I did, but it took a year later when I actually was able to move relatively well. I'd say okay. But then I went through severe periods of anxiety and depression, because when I was down and trying to get back up on my feet, and I spoke to one of my buddies who's a brain surgeon, a neurologist, and we talked about that. He said, when you're hurt, the first thing your body is going to do is try to repair itself. So you didn't have all these issues because your body and your brain was tied up with just getting up and walking, getting off of this walker and putting one foot in front of the other. He said, now that that's happened, now your brain is able to go back and clear some space out for things that it wants to do. I went through anxiety, light periods of depression for a period of time. And then I kind of figured it out because my performance wasn't good. I was still expected to do work with my foundation and these organizations, and they're still calling me. And I would get a phone call and look at the number and ball up and go to sleep for like 6 hours, not even able to deal with it. And then I figured it out. I said, oh, this has got to be depression and anxiety, because the anxiety was just freaking out by looking at a phone call, and the depression was very real. So I know that these things are insidious. They're very insidious. And I figured it out, but I wasn't having any kind of psychological treatment at that point because I was trying to be macho man. And I figured, I'm back walking again, everything is okay. And everyone around me thought it was okay. And I had to stop, do a restart, and I had to call people up. And it took me a month to call up certain people in my organizations and say, look, I know you're worried about me. You think that I'm back on my feet. You see me on these calls and everything, but things are not good around here. And this is what I'm going through. And I need you to understand so you can help me to get through it. So it's a very real thing, very real thing. So
is it now more acceptable for athletes to step away from what you mentioned earlier about being the gladiator and putting their mental health first? That wouldn't have happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Whereas now athletes are saying, look, I don't owe you anything more than what I've given you every day. I'm going to put myself first. Are you happy to see that is more acceptable and that athletes are being more public about taking care of that, particularly as it impacts young people and young athletes?
Yeah, and I think the pressure on the athletes today is a lot different than it was when I was running. When you covered track and field and swimming and all these other sports, it was like, the top 20 newspapers in the country, AP, UPI, Reuters, and then there was ABC, NBC, and CBS. That was the whole universe. Now you have social media, you have people putting their profiles up. You have the sponsors, or what do they call it when people are not innovators, when they are
influencers.
Influencers. They have all this pressure on them. You got TikTok, they're posting things every day. And I think that builds up a lot of pressure internally to have to manage all that. Not to mention a case like a Simone Biles or a Naomi Osaka that have mega contracts all over the world. They've got agents. Everyone wants to talk to them, press conferences, you have to train, you have family. Everywhere you go, people recognize you. It's and I've gone through that as well. After the 84 and 88 Olympics, I couldn't go anywhere without being recognized at all. And it builds up on you. But I can imagine that today, there's probably 3 to 4 times the amount of pressure. And I like seeing the athletes take a break because their pressure is immense. And it's not anything you can turn off. If the only way you can turn it off is you have to unplug something yourself. You can't expect the world to not recognize you, or people with good intentions to not come up when you're having dinner and you might be tired and be at a business meeting and wanting an autograph and really being insistent. You can't turn it off when you're out there all the time. So sometimes you have to find ways to unplug yourself. And I think that's what we're seeing happening. I think it's a good thing.
Those are messages that even those of us who are not Olympians and who are not even athletic can take with us, Edwin, about the mental health, about anxiety, recognizing anxiety and depression and things like that. So, Edwin, thank you so much for coming today, being able to explain a little bit about the Olympics. And Roy, thank you for helping me moderate this conversation. I just had on this photo, I can say, or this cover from Sports Illustrated, and that is one that you shared with us, Edwin. And I have to say, there's a lot of things that are shocking to me about this cover, but one of them is that Sports Illustrated was $1.75. That is one of the most shocking things to me about this cover.
You can't even get a 3-piece Reese cup for that anymore.
I don't even know that you can get the 2-piece one anymore.
That's right.
For that, Edwin. So, Roy, thank you for using your Sports Illustrated experience here in this sports, your knowledge in this topic as well, helping me with this interview. Edwin, thank you again for your time. I know you're a busy man, but both of you, thank you so much.
All right. Thank
you
you.
very much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.